where I worked with the youth of clients from, private world clients to high net worth clients to, institutional investors, both local and offshore. And in the last 2 years, I've transitioned into a private wealth advisor, where my focus is really, providing wealth advisory services to the high net worth individuals, private clients, as well as family offices, because I do feel like, we need to protect and help to preserve the wealth that they're creating, particularly as they look at moving them from one generation to the other.
Fantastic. Look forward to our discussion, looking at succession, looking at family office trends. We also have a pre-recorded contribution from Anani, who's a family business advisor. I think Anne and the team are going to play a short video now from Njoki, and then we've got some poll questions. We've got our discussion to have with Paul and Abiola. So please do, Anne, if you want to share the video, then feel free to do so now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anani. I am a succession specialist. I help family business owners take their enterprises from lifetime to legacy. I'm also the author of a newly released book called Lifetime to Legacy. In it, I explore themes on how families can build legacy businesses and legacy wealth. And lastly, I am co-founder of African Family Firms. We are a non-profit community of business owners on the African continent and in the diaspora, looking to build legacy businesses and legacy wealth. And we do this through 4 pillars of activities. We have a community of business owners that come together and share ideas. We have education and training. We do research with partner organizations. And lastly, we are engaged in a lot of others. Regrettably, I can't make it to the live session and thought to just share some thoughts on what I'm seeing with my clientele on managing family wealth globally, for Africans in particular. Firstly, thank you, Regina and Anne, for your hard work in putting this conference together. We're really grateful for your strong voice in the industry and really championing the importance of building African wealth from a legacy perspective. We're really grateful, so thank you. So I thought to just talk a little bit on, like I said, what I'm seeing with clientele and a bit of my thoughts on how you can manage your family wealth globally. A lot of folks on the African continent are navigating a very tough business environment with operating businesses and operating assets here being challenged by COVID-19 and disruption and issues around supply chain, being challenged by really the tough political and economic climates. For instance, in Nigeria, we've seen a lot of depreciation. So whilst operating businesses from a local currency perspective may be seeing rapid growth, from a foreign currency perspective, it's a different story. And when we look at families, typically the first generation business owners, the builders may be on the ground, on the continent, building their family enterprises, but the second generation typically maybe overseas, or if they're not overseas, they're thinking of going overseas. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of flights, particularly amongst the millennials and the Gen Zs moving abroad. And so the importance of foreign currency assets and wealth is becoming a lot more topical and important. And also we're seeing a lot of folks having liquidity challenges within their enterprises as a result of the downturn with COVID-19 and so on and so forth. And a lot of our governments really struggling with strong policy direction to re-energize the economy and propel it forward. And these 3 themes are putting a squeeze on ability to build legacy enterprises. I think as a destination, and it's really important as African family business owners, regardless of the season that we're in, to really look to build truly diversified wealth, build resilient families, resilient wealth that would withstand whatever disruption. And we can do so in such a way where, yes, the operating business is yielding cash, but not to be overexposed asset-wise, industry-wise, geography-wise to operating businesses or specific asset classes. For instance, a lot of my clientele also have a lot of landed property, real estate on the continent, and during the downturn, they've tried to sell these properties rather. I think there's a number of things to think about. Methodical structure through which you're extracting cash flow from your operating businesses on the ground in Africa to build a wealth portfolio that has little correlation with your underlying source of wealth. And this correlation, thinking through things like the industry, the asset class, more liquid assets rather than illiquid assets, thinking through geography and so on and so forth. That's one thing I would really encourage. The second thing I would encourage is to think through which jurisdiction. So as a family, where is your destination of choice? And in this day and age, the older generations tended to like Jersey as a destination for their wealth structures. The last 10, 15 years, there was a lot of talk about Mauritius. Up and coming more like the Netherlands. But also, if you are US exposed or US centric, then maybe you need to consult specialists as well. So you may need to think through where exactly is our destination of choice to domicile our wealth. And naturally, this leads to conversation on tax. So definitely be a great idea to get an expert, an advisor in the room that's well versed in international tax matters that would look specifically to your situation in your family to evaluate the residency, domicile, and also the underlying assets and advise on where would be a best jurisdiction from a tax perspective, but also from just an operating perspective. So other considerations in play: is this a jurisdiction you're likely to visit? Say, for instance, are you likely to want to have kids in university or boarding school and things of the like? That's something that I would definitely recommend. And then in my book, I talk a lot about family enterprise management planning consists not just of the technical. So it consists not just of investment management and wealth management, tax planning, strategic business planning, but also consists of the relational. I really believe that here lies an opportunity to come together as a family and collectively ruminate on where are we going and what do we want, and what are our individual missions and visions, and how does that then fit into the collective vision and mission, and what ideas can we bring to the table to take us there. And here in this age that we're in, there's a lot of diversity of thought within our families, and we can draw upon that diversity of thought to start to collectively ruminate on how we can put things together and start to engage the rising generation, the next generation, they may have a different network. For instance, they may have access to experts and expertise to assist in this journey, because this journey consists not just of the technical, it also consists of the relational. And this journey requires multidisciplinary expertise. It's important to draw upon a multidisciplinary range of experts and that understand African business owners, African terrain, understand the challenges that we face, understand the cultural nuances, and are able to take on that destination. A common challenge that a lot of folks within my community face is when they try to take their family wealth globally, working with some service providers, take-home procedures, know your customer can be very rigorous when you're coming from a high-risk jurisdiction like in Africa. And they ask for an arm and a leg in terms of information, and that can be quite off-putting for certain people, but I would recommend, like I said, working with people that understand the African continent, able to guide you through the take-home procedure process, advise you and things of the like. And like I was alluding to, don't neglect this just to the advisors to drive your process in managing family wealth globally. I'm very, very passionate about the fact that outsiders will not understand the inside perspective as well as you will. So you might want to start to think about selecting a family champion or a representative that would be, so to speak, the family office representative to drive this process forward. And that takes us to another conversation on starting to think about formalizing and institutionalizing your management of the family wealth, not just leaving it to the investment managers, financial planners, but really starting to put a structure, a dedicated, bespoke, curated structure, a one-stop shop, where there's a total picture of the entire family wealth. There's a picture of the assets, the valuation, the risk. There's a picture of how we're protecting our investments. There's a picture of where are we heading to in the future. And these are the destination of the setup of the family office may come out from conversations within the family. So I would highly recommend that you make the most of the experts that have been showcased on this conference and get in touch with them and see how you can move things forward. But I would also recommend that you invest in understanding and unlocking the relational connectivity in your family. And like I said, I talk about this in my book, Lifetime to Legacy, which you can check out. And I'm sure the link to where you can find a copy will be shared, but there's more information on my website, www.nikeanani.com/book. That's NIKEANANI.com/book. And there's a video reel with more information on the book. There's sample chapters where you can read for free some of the content, and also there's a link to where you can buy the book from Amazon. So thank you so much. Take care.
Plenty of food for thought there. Now we're going to get into our conversation with Paul and Abiola. Perhaps, Paul, you could kick us off. It'd be interesting to get the conversation underway, just talking about when you're advising clients, what are some of the key drivers they're looking for in wealth management? Are they looking to make a quick buck? Are they looking for short-term returns in markets, or are they approaching you discussing something with more of a long-term time horizon for themselves or perhaps the next generation?
Thank you very much, David. I think both, but I think the most important thing is for us as financial advisors, as wealth managers, is to actually settle down the conversation to what is the real client goal? What do you really want to achieve? Because it's easy to say I want to make money, or I want 10%, I want 20%, but so that you do what, right? So when you make that money, so what are you going to do? And this gravitates us back to what we call life goals. And last year, towards the end, we did a survey. In 10 markets, Kenya was included in that survey. And we found that clients had actually changed their life goals, mostly prompted by the COVID pandemic. And some of the top goals that came across were improve their personal health. So that was one of the key goals that came up. Their children education and future was another goal. So that also leads into legacy planning and all that. There was a retirement, comfortable retirement, and generally to improve their lifestyle and wellness. So these are the top 4 goals. And really, the kind of advice and conversation we're having with our clients now is really asking them, how are your goals like? Have they changed? And if they have changed, are you ready? Are you ready for your new goals? And if they have not still changed, are you still on track from where you are before COVID? Are you still on track? Your finances are on track to actually meet these goals.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Abiola, I mean, are you also finding that clients have, during the pandemic, reflected on the health, succession, legacy has just come to the fore in a way that it was in the background before the pandemic? It's brought it right to their attention.
Absolutely. Again, as you can imagine, we live in a very sort of challenging economic climate, both in Africa and also globally, and it's caused a lot of reassessment of values. And one of the things that we're striving to do at Artios is to align those values with their wealth goals. What used to happen in the past was a lot of investors just focus on returns and focus on I just want to make X amount of money. But now there's a shift in the way that money is being made and essentially in what it is being invested in. We're seeing a lot more focus on improved lifestyle. So for example, people are taking more opportunities to do the things that they want to do, they've always loved to do. And again, and also to focus on things that matter, like Paul said, children, family, legacy. Those are thoughts that are coming up a lot more, that are coming up for a lot more than before. And particularly as the descendants, the children are also veering off into various directions. It is actually forcing the principals, the parents, to start to reassess what they thought was going to be the succession plan and what they thought was going to be the transition plan. So we're seeing that a lot more come up.
Okay, thank you. And we heard from Nike on the video that the foreign currency aspect, volatility of foreign currencies is obviously a key focus for investors across the African continent. I mean, Abiola, do you find that conversations about currency and how clients are positioned in dollar or euro, pound, other currencies is really something that drives a lot of decision making?
Absolutely. A lot of, you have to understand in Nigeria, a lot of our wealth, primarily, particularly for people in the high income bracket, is located, domestically. And so we've had a state of, currency sort of deval that has continuously persisted over the last 24 months. And so what we're seeing is that for people who are asset heavy in domestic currency, we're beginning to see them clamor for, how can I transition some of my assets into more foreign and stable markets? I mean, the exposures for some of these investors are quite high. So the focus is now to reallocate both geographically and also diversify in terms of the various asset classes. You did a session on real estate. It's a real big thing in Nigeria. A lot of high net worth individuals are very focused on real estate, but they've now started to reconsider that asset class and ask themselves, particularly knowing that it's all domiciled in Nigeria, that are there opportunities to shift some of that, currency risk out of Nigeria? And so that's what we're working on. Yeah.
So clients maybe feel overexposed long property locally, that they're now looking to actually put maybe to work in other asset classes internationally. Is that
absolutely?
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And Paul, I mean, the currency question must be something that you're constantly looking at with clients because it's a critical factor. How do you approach this this discussion?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yes, definitely. If you're in any of the African countries, let me say emerging markets, because South Asian, South American economies, you'll find over time the currency will slide away versus I would say the big 4 or 5 currencies. And because you're looking at generation wealth here, you have to be thinking, above 10 years into 20 to 30 years. And we have enough charts and graphs to show us that currency have lost value to the tune of, 50 odd % in the last 15 years. So that conversation hits home when you look at it from that perspective. The other perspective to look at it is from inflation. And this is now very topical across everywhere in the markets. And we have to ask ourselves that is the rate at which your wealth is growing either at pace or higher than the general rate of inflation, because that is the actual purchasing power of the currency, or is the preservation value of the currency or your investment. So that's how we approach the conversation. The good thing is, from where we are and being a global bank, we're able to offer our clients, based on their existing relationship in country, capabilities to invest across the globe, pretty much everywhere, and in pretty much all investment grade assets across any market across the globe. So then the conversation really grounds very quickly. We're able to show them you can actually put your money in China here now, or in the US, or in the UK, or probably in another African country. So those are things we're able to do. Yeah.
Is cryptocurrency a distraction in that discussion, or is that part of the picture that you see as an evolving space that clients may well get involved in over time?
David, you can be sure I knew this question would come up, because in every session with my clients, I answer this question. So I was ready for it. But these are the thoughts. So firstly, we don't take crypto as an investment category, and we don't encourage our clients to put a lot of their net worth into crypto. We actually ask our clients, if you have to do it, don't do more than 5% of your net worth, and just treat it as any of the other items, collectible items like paintings and those kind of things. Now, if you hit it big, you hit it big. But also there's a risk that you could also lose it. So you just have to restrict it to that level, treat it as such. I think we want to concentrate more on thinking about, more of the traditional assets, assets that are liquid, assets that generally, preserve value, and assets that can be passed from generation to generation.
And which regions do the clients that you work with in Kenya and East Africa tend to favor? Do they like the US S&P? Do they like investing in the American economy? What's the view on getting exposure to India or China? Where does their interest lie? Is it into getting blue chip equities and bonds in developed markets is what they're kind of coming to you for, or where do conversations tend to go? Sorry, Paul, that was for you.
I think Paul has got off here.
I mean, Abiola, perhaps you could answer to that. In that, where do clients in East Africa, for example, look to invest? Are they looking for developed market blue chip investments? Are they looking towards Asia and India and China and thinking there's returns there and interest? What do you find in conversations with clients about where they want to invest internationally?
So in Nigeria, for most of our investors, we tend to find that they prefer the UK and the US markets. I think largely because these are markets that they're very familiar with. A lot of Nigerians have ties to either the UK or the US, and so they kind of feel a lot of sort of affinity to those markets, and they understand them better. So we do a broad range of investments for them. So equities is very topical. And it ranges from direct equity, direct stocks, and also ETFs. Again, the focus is on growth and dividend-paying stocks and stability, stocks that are generally stable. And in the UK, for most of our investors, it's really centered around property, because the property market in the UK is one that they sort of favor. So when we think of that, they sort of look at those sort of those two areas. Other places that they would consider potentially would be South Africa. Again, I think it's also because we do have ties there, and people tend to sort of understand them. So they kind of look at it from the basis of property as well. That's sort of where we see them sort of pitch their tent there.
Very interesting. Paul, I think you're back on with us. I was just asking about which regions clients from East Africa like investing in, and Abiola said from the West African perspective, from the clients she deals with in Nigeria, they look to the UK for property, or UK and US markets for blue chip investments, but also South Africa. What is it that you see in terms of regions that are popular with the clients that you speak to?
Yeah, so I would say about half of the clients, like slightly more than half, like to invest locally. I think just on the back of better returns and give or take fairly stable economy. Kenya has been quite stable for a period of time, but more and more we are seeing clients get into the US market. So US market is, in terms of the best performing investment category in the US, mostly S&P, tech. They love US tech. We are seeing interest in China now, and of course, because we have also introduced quite a bit of variety of products from the Asia, mostly China economy. So that's another area we are finding quite a bit of interest. More recently this year, we've seen quite a lot of growth in ESG, ESG type investment categories. Again, because I think globally the news are towards being sustainable and all that. So you're seeing a little bit of move of portfolio towards ESG type portfolios. Yeah.
Interesting. And is that in African countries in African companies with ESG strategies, or just on a global equities?
Global equities. Yeah. Global equities.
The demand there is being driven by clients. Are clients more educated around this space of ESG and more demanding of it, or is it that is there more supply side in the sense of more banks are talking about it?
I think it's a supply side. I think there are more products now. People are coming to say, okay, my investment is green. And of course, you have to be very careful that we don't have greenwashing. But I think that the news are out there. So clients are starting to ask, okay, what about this? The good thing is also that during COVID, I think clients spent quite a bit of time studying how the future may look like. I think they spent time studying material and attending, I guess, webinars and all that. So they are more informed. They seem like they're more informed than they were before. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. And there's a question in the chat just asking, we get information about Africa being the next big thing for wealth creation. Well, what do you think the reason is most high net worths intend to invest abroad? I mean, Abiola, it's a big question, complicated answer, but what's your perspective on why high net worths locally do look abroad for some of their savings and investments?
I think the fact is that a lot of high net worth already have established businesses in Nigeria, in Africa essentially, and so from an asset creation point of view, the main source of creating their wealth is domiciled in Africa. And so for them, it's really just about diversification, and which can, involve both geographical and, asset class diversification. And so it's just a way for them to hedge the sort of the risk that, of doing business in Africa. It's not because they don't want to. In fact, quite a lot of them would rather prefer to, have all their assets in country or in Africa. But I think, again, as they get bigger and as their wealth increases, there's also just that challenge of having to have a well-diversified and well-hedged portfolio so that they can be able to, I guess, one, sustain their business, secondly, also, sustain their wealth and keep growing and preserving their wealth. So it's not a preference per se, it's more of a strategy that they have to adopt by way of, ensuring that the wealth continues to be preserved.
There's already a heavy exposure through their businesses in the local economy, and it's simply to rebalance to invest abroad. So I think that's very interesting. Do keep the questions coming through. We've got plenty of time on this session to get questions to Abiola and to Paul. Paul mentioned about tech stocks being popular with clients. I mean, Abiola, we read in the FT about the Nigerian scene for fintech that sounds hugely interesting, and companies raising large amounts of money and going global with it. Is that something you see very tangibly on the ground, the economic activity there in certain key sectors?
Absolutely. I was going to mention that a huge part, a huge asset class that that investors are gravitating towards is VC. I mean, like there is, I would say, there's a new VC firm opening up in Nigeria every other month. It's been quite popular, and a lot of these VC firms and funds are financed by the high net worth individual. Of course, some foreign investors also bring in money, but we also have quite an active local participation there from HNIs and and oligarchs who again want to get in on in front of that the wave, I would say, the tech wave. And fintech has been a very popular destination for where some of that wealth, so for some of where that funds is channeled through. We've seen a huge inflow into the fintech. I think Nigeria is probably the largest receiver of funds in terms of VC, and on the continent, yes. So, and we continue to see that demand across, and fintech definitely has been very popular. Another popular space that people tend to put money in is also the anything that has to do with the mass market that helps to elevate would I say that helps to create financial inclusion on the finance side, and also helps to make the standard of living for the mass market people a lot more easier. So we tend to see a lot of investments flow through that space as well.
So I mean, on the succession and governance side, investors might end up with a very valuable holding in a company, a Nigerian company whose valuation is going up. do you find the governance is in place? Is it held in structures that will allow value to be created? And we mentioned on the top about the succession and legacy being created. When these stakes are being taken, is full consideration being given to how it fits into a plan, or that can be an afterthought? What do you see?
Usually an afterthought. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the work that we're doing, and the work is, really to set up that family governance structure, not only currently, but also as the family progresses over the years. It's something that we've seen that is generally lacking. Usually, it's not because the principal doesn't want to do it. It's also because sometimes they don't really know how, and then of course, as you can imagine, the dynamics in family borders on emotions to logic, and so just having to navigate all of that. But again, I think one of the things that we try to do in Artios is just to sit with the family, identify their goals, and help them to put the governance structure in place. And the governance structure, would also entail coming up with an investment strategy and a plan, and and who in the family would be responsible for driving or sort of overseeing that process, so that when things like investments in VC, turn a huge return in the future, that wealth, it's being deployed in alignment with the plans that have been set up.
Okay, thank you. Question in the chat from Sharon, just asking, what role do SMEs play in terms of domestic GDP, and what function do you think would that constitutes private family wealth? I suppose this question is really about the importance of family business. I mean, Nike was mentioning that is her whole, segment and focus is around how family businesses create wealth and manage it. But do you think, Abiola, in the economies of Nigeria, for example, the SME sector is an important engine. It's not just the big institutional names, it's the large number of small companies that create employment and wealth across the country. How do you see the family business sector in Nigeria as something that's active and vital?
I cannot underestimate the impact of the SMEs in Nigeria. I mean, I think they're really the engine that drives a lot of economic activities. Unfortunately, they're not the big names, so you don't tend to see them. And a lot of families are actually, I wouldn't even call them SMEs. I mean, some of family business that we tend to work with are family businesses that are at the stage of being scalable. So they're really at the point where, they started off as SMEs, but they've now grown by certain leaps and bounds, and they're now at the point where, they're sitting with people and having conversations along partnerships, selling down some of their holdings, because they've gotten, they've built that, they've been able to build that sustainable franchise, not just in one region, but usually they've built it across a few regions in Nigeria. And I think they're really critical. And that's why I mentioned that a lot of wealth is actually embedded in those businesses, because they have a huge cash flow potential that they offer to the families. And so one of the, and that's one of the reasons why they're very important, from an economic-based point of view. So I think the key thing is also to make sure that those businesses are scalable, where they don't just remain SMEs, but they now are able to sit, alongside large corporates, what we call large corporates. Yes, so that's a real challenge.
Thank you. Paul, how do you see it from East Africa? I imagine, again, SMEs, family businesses, it's the engine room of the economy. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think it will be the same thing as what Abiola has said for Nigeria. I think the only one thing I wanted to add is that, how are we helping SMEs so that they actually get into the next stage? I think one of the things that we found is, from a wealth management perspective, of course, there's the banking aspect, giving them credit and all that to help them expand. But from a wealth perspective is firstly, to help them create passive streams of income. I think one of the things we found during COVID when there was lockdown is that some businesses could not open, they could not get income, they could not be able to pay their employees, and they had to probably even get rid of their very good employees or give away their premises because they couldn't just pay rent, right? So we are finding it important that we create a passive form of income for them by investing in liquid assets. Therefore, then when they need to run during tough times, then they can be able to tap into this liquidity and keep their business afloat. The other thing we've also found very useful is to tap, whatever wealth they have invested in, we create a credit line for them. And that has come very handy. So we create a credit line for them. We're thinking about protection as well. And I know maybe we may discuss protection or not, but really one of the things that you find in most African businesses, and including individuals, is that the level of insurance is very low. So businesses leave themselves very exposed. And one swipe at it from a risk point of view, be it as a result of climate change or be it as a result of, whatever it is, human error or natural calamities, really puts the business completely out. So that's another area we are really building capacity around. And of course, the whole area of advice and wealth transfer. So we are really clear that as an organization, we need to support these businesses in terms of the basics of actually surviving and the basics of transition.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. On the family office sector, Abiola, I mean, Nike mentioned it in her piece around it's not about labels, it's about just bringing the good governance, the right people making decisions around the family and bring some order to it. What's your feeling about how the family office scene is developing in Nigeria as you see it up close? It's a buzzword that's thrown around and has different applications in different markets, but what's your read?
I think that it's become quite essential in Nigeria, and it has actually grown quite a bit in the last, would I say, 24 to 18 months, particularly where you have, people, oligarchs who have, built a solid, would I say, enterprise. And there's really just a lot at stake. So we've seen a few of them, build family offices with proper structure, both domestically and internationally. And we're seeing a lot more shift, by some of these oligarchs who haven't yet done that to doing that. What we're also seeing is an advent of multi-family office structures. I think the reality is that there are some people who may not be able to afford the cost of running an individual family office, but the reality is that they also do have those needs where they may not be big enough, but they definitely are sort of, can be positioned to transition into a full-fledged family office. And so that's what we're seeing, where multi-family office structures that would allow some sort of guidance and soft initiation into the family office process, put structures in place, as Paul mentioned, structures around protecting their business, helping them with family governance, helping them with, setting up trusts, helping them with estate and will planning. So just helping them with that entire value chain and making sure that they're well positioned. Because again, while they may not be as big as the ones that are popular, the ones that we know, the reality is that they're economically relevant. Their business, what they do, has some sort of economic relevance. And some of these businesses employ north of about 200 to 300 people, and they're paying salaries and even more, and they distribute just not in Nigeria, but just across Africa. So it's really important that we help to protect those businesses and help them, to sort of have the right structure and the right processes in place. So multi-family office is something that's gaining strength, as well as individual family offices.
Does technology also play a role? Because there's more and more solutions now that allow the reporting role that would have been done by a more expensive traditional family office to be available at a lower asset base, and so that allows people to start doing pieces. So I've spoke to people recently more about virtual family offices with a professional and some technology doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Do you think that's right? It provides a lower entry point for those who have some complexity, looking for a better angle on their wealth?
Well, I think technology definitely will play a role. I think for us in Nigeria, because it's still early stages, the adoption to technology may not be as quick as we'd want it to. It's a lot of hand-holding that needs to happen. So a lot of FaceTime, because these are people that, first of all, they don't even think they need the family office setup. They're like, well, I've been managing my wealth for many years, I've done this well. So it's really a lot of hand-holding. I mean, of course, the younger ones are more dynamic. Yes, definitely technology will feed into that. But when you're talking about people that are in like the early 60s, late 70s, it's a lot of hand-holding. You're pretty much doing the work. You're just getting the insight from them and helping them put it together. Of course, as you transition to the next generation, then technology would then begin to be more sort of something that you would use to drive that business a lot more. But at the initial stages where we're looking at the age range of about 60 to about 70, 50 to 70, technology may not necessarily be the driving factor, but we can't deny it. From a reporting point of view, it's definitely been very useful, and it would definitely be something that, would help to make the reporting easier. But I tend to find that one-on-one communication and just good old formal banking processes
Yeah.
is what they need, you know.
Trust and confidence is built. The technology is a secondary. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's very interesting. And Paul mentioned before about the rise in ESG as something that's just more part of the conversation, partly because it's being supplied and offered by more financial services organizations. But how do you see the discussion with I suppose partly with NextGen, but also just generally with private wealth on how portfolios are invested? Is ESG something that's on the radar, more interest to people than it was before?
I think for individuals whose businesses transcend not just their current business domiciliation, but they transcend other I guess more developed markets, ESG becomes topical. When you look at it in Nigeria specifically, I wouldn't say that it's not really a huge topic, but as they invest in other markets, as their businesses particularly are now being visible in other more developed markets, there is just a need to sort of focus on that. And that's one of the things we try to build in, because again, we tend to look at it not from where you are right now, but from really where you intend to go to. So we sort of build it into that structure, and usually they're quite fine with it, because again, for most people, there's just sort of that latent goal and desire that they have, but they've never really found a way to express it. So we kind of marry the two together and, give them something that, speaks to that.
Thank you. Just coming into the last 10 minutes of this conversation, so still plenty of time to put questions in the chat for Abiola and Paul. Paul, just coming back to you on the family office front. Abiola set out what she sees on the governance side. Are you seeing more professionalization in governance? I imagine you are often working with trustees or other professionals who are managing structures where you are undertaking an asset management, investment management role. How do you see the professionalization of wealth structuring?
Still in the very early days. I think similar to what Abiola has said, I think there's still a lot of work to happen. Firstly, to convince this family that indeed they need to professionalize it, and more important, for them to feel that indeed that is the right way to go to ensure that their wealth transition and is sustainable. So I think a lot of groundwork needs to happen, and really we need to bring more players into the play. Of course, from a legal perspective, there's a requirement in terms of the structures which then would work with the relevant laws, the tax planners and accountants, and of course banks and of course wealth managers. I think this is very early days. I still believe that, and if we step back, David, and we can all step back a bit. If you think about it, most of the African nations got independence around the late 60s and into the 70s, right? So if you count just by any family that right off the independence started becoming either business people or they went to profession, if you look that time, it's about 50, 60 years, right? So that means it's the first time in the history of these nations that the wealth is transferring, the very first time. And really, we are the people at this one time of God has given us to be here now, to be the first people who actually help the first major wealth transfer in Africa. So we haven't practiced this, we haven't. That is the reality on the ground. So we have to, of course, some mistakes will be made, and I hope there will be fewer. But really, it would be better off for a family that actually goes some sort of professionalization. Mistakes are likely to be less than those who leave themselves completely out and think they may get it right. So it's very important, and I think if I'm feeling passionate about it, it's exactly that. We are at that point where we have to help these families to actually transition wealth, the first time ever in these nations. Yeah. Fascinating,
Paul. Abiola, perspective on Paul's comments.
Honestly, Paul, I couldn't have said it any better. I think I'm a living witness of what you're saying. My grandfather was very wealthy. He died about 30 years ago, and we come from a largely polygamous home, and up until today, I don't think his wealth, it just pretty much just wasting away in some places, in some of his property. So I truly, for me, it's really also personal because I've seen that happen to me firsthand. But I really then, so and that's the story for most people that have grandparents who are wealthy. The wealth is really, it's just not available. It didn't pass on. It just died. A few made it through, but it just died. And so it's really now our turn and our charge, as Paul said. I feel like a warrior now. Our charge and our turn to help these families not make the same mistakes that have been made in the past. We're here to guide them. We have a wealth of knowledge. I've worked in financial services. Paul is currently doing so. We also have experience. Okay, one of the things that tends to be lacking is usually you get something from, a foreign market and you're trying to implement it. But we are local. We understand the nuances. We understand the moral issues, the family issues, the religious issues. So not only do we make a plan for you that aligns with, best investment practice, but we also take into consideration those nuances that someone else may not really understand, right? And we help you to build a successful, model that can be, that helps for transition. So I think, yes, it's really critical. And we're right at the edge of that happening. So I'm quite excited about it.
And I guess another aspect of that whole discussion as well on this, the first wealth transfer, as it were, is that adult children educated abroad or go and live in the UK and the US. So family businesses, I expect, are wondering when's a good time to sell. Should we actually become investors rather than operators? And there's no easy solution to that, because the children who go abroad could well come back with new skills, new angles, new contacts, and grow fantastic businesses in a growth market. I mean, how do you even start to help people understand and advise on these kind of things, Abiola, as to the succession planning in a family business context, or when's the right time to sell,
Yeah, so I mean, you're very correct. We have people, I mean, I have personal experience, people I know and businesses that I'm supporting who the children, do not have any interest in the business. They're literally like, we don't, they built a life for themselves abroad. This business has sent them to school, paid their bills, and the children are like, well, that's what you want. I just want to be, in fashion or in music or in tech or something. And sometimes the ability to fuse the two and marry those desires is not really there. And so the question, as you said, now begins to be, how does this business transcend to the next generation? So conversations around partnerships, where could we find a foreign partner that would be a part of this business, maybe to sell off some stake in the business. Do you want to be a part of a smaller, want to be a part of a larger conglomerate? So there are conversations that are beginning to happen. Or do you even just want to sell it in its entirety and just break it up in parts and then, take your money and do something else? Of course, those things bring about a lot of emotion, as you can imagine. From the children's side and from the parents' side. But I think our goal is to sort of help to marry the two, find the middle ground where both the children and the parents, feel heard and feel like there's a solution that is workable. I do feel like the children have some compassion, but the weight of being part of a family that is successful, sometimes a lot to bear. So we just have to try and navigate that.
Okay, thank you for that. No, really fascinating area. We've got a question from Diana just in the chat that we're going to come to maybe. How do you manage your investment in Africa if you're in the diaspora, since we're not on the ground all the time? So I guess someone who's may perhaps come to the UK is invested or interested in companies on the continent. How do you approach that, Abiola, for example, on people looking at exposure and companies within Africa?
I think the first thing I would say is find a reputable partner in Africa to work with. So depending on what asset class you want to invest in, make sure you find a reputable partner. If it's going to be stockbroking or asset management, make sure you find someone that's reputable. Paul is he's in Kenya, he can help you. I'm in Nigeria, you can reach out to me. I think that's the first step. Then the second step is, I would say, do your due diligence. Which areas would you like to invest in, right? I think one of the things that people, when they hear about African investing, they usually just throw a dart and pick what's most popular. No, I would say do your research, find out what areas have high growth, or and then when you do your research and you speak to your advisor, you're able to then come up with a plan that would align with what you want. What you don't want to do is just pick anyone or just do any investment because it's popular and topical. You want to speak to the experts. I'm a firm believer, if you have a headache, go to the doctor. If you want to talk about your money, go to the professionals. And trust me, we would always be open and willing to help you.
Fantastic. Trusted local advice. Paul, just a perspective on African diaspora investing back into the economy, seeing growth and interested to try and capitalize on it. How can they navigate those local markets?
Yeah, I think growth, return, and risk are siblings. So always look at it from that perspective. In my view, I actually don't look at it that way. I look at the whole globe, as a one big investment possibility, because all you need to do is to balance what is your risk appetite versus the return you're looking at. Now, if you have knowledge and experience, and of course, if you can use a professional to be able to get to the African market, that can help you reduce the risk in a big way, while maybe maintaining the return. So that could be a good way. But if you don't, then I would say, I think there's no point, because the risk will be disproportionate to the return you'll get in the market. So that's how I look at it. And it's complete wealth management. For me, I'm completely open to any asset class, as long as it's an investment grade asset class. And I look at risk return, period.
Fantastic. Well, look, we've had a terrific conversation this afternoon. Thank you so much, Paul and Abiola. I've definitely learned something, and I hope the audience has also enjoyed it. Some great questions in the chat. And I'd just like to hand back over to Anne.
All right. Thank you, David. Thank you, Abiola. Thank you, Paul, for again another great session here. Really diverse views. It was really informative. Even me in the industry, I always get to learn one or two things here and there. So that is really great. So I really want to say, for all the attendees, if you have any questions around managing your family wealth, if you're in the West Africa region, Abiola is the go-to person. If you're in East Africa, you can always reach out to me and to Paul with Standard Chartered Bank. So again, we look forward to supporting you as you manage your family wealth.